I hope that now you can hear me better in this way. What I was trying to say is that when you are translating, you are you are using either two types of great. Rami, thank you very much, Al-Muteri, and thank you, Dr. Ala, as well, and Vibes. Now, I am open to two things this evening. I was just saying about literal translation and trying to make sense and logic of what you are translating. Let me just say something here first. How do you translate? And what are the rules for translation in practical terms? You have to first read the text. If it's a film, you need to watch a film, the whole film. If it is a text, you need to read the whole text. When you are reading the text and when you are watching the film, what you need to do is to highlight the difficult words that you don't know. So that's the first thing. You read the text as an RL reader, source language reader, SL reader. In other words, you're reading it as if it's reading it for yourself in order to understand it yourself by yourself. So you read it first to understand it. If it's a film, you watch it to understand what's going on in the film, all the parts of the film. Places where you are not sure about, you underline the areas where you're not sure about. Like if it is a film, you highlight the time codes where you have problems with, then you go back to them and check them. In terms of if it's a text, you highlight all the difficult words in the text, and this is the first step, which is source language reader. You read the text. You're trying to understand the text. If you don't understand any parts of the text, go and find out what these parts mean to you as a reader. Now, also the second point, or the second step, or the second hat that you need to wear is the hat of the researcher. You research the words that are difficult. Research them first in a monolingual dictionary, like Cambridge Dictionary, Webster Online, Collins, these well-known dictionaries, not Google, because Uncle Google, as I say, is unreliable. Never rely on Google Translate or Al-Maani or something like that. They are not reliable dictionaries. You need to go for top quality dictionaries, and first of all you go to monolingual dictionaries in the ST. The ST, if it's in Arabic, you go for معجم الوسيط. إذا كان بالعربي بتروح على معجم الوسيط لسان العرب. I have معجم الوسيط here. You see, I use that, or I use, and if I am, this is monolingual, so I need to know the words in the language, in the original language. I don't need to, sometimes, for example, what's the word ra'il in Arabic? Ra'il, it means generation. So you see, if you don't know in Arabic what it means, there's no point in going to the dictionary and finding in the dictionary what it means. First, you have to go to the original language and the source language, and then know what the text is trying to tell you. First, so the first step is to be source language reader. Second thing is to be a researcher. In other words, you research all the difficult words, all the difficult terms, all the difficult collocations, all the difficult idioms. In order to understand the text perfectly well, you have to understand it inside out and use quality dictionaries. Quality dictionaries means that you have to go for good, excellent dictionaries. If you're translating from Arabic into English, then you have to go to Hansver. Hansver is spelled Hanswer. Hansver. He's German, and he is translating, or his dictionary is from Arabic into English. I don't know whether I have it here with me, but it is a really important one. Actually, I do have it here, and this is for translating this is for translating from I don't know whether you can see it, but it's actually translating. It's called the dictionary, a dictionary of modern written Arabic, a dictionary of modern Arabic. I know, I'm sorry, it is the other way around. I am trying to get it working, and it's not. But anyway, his name is Hans Ver, H-A-N-S, Hans, and Ver, W-E-H-R. This is an excellent dictionary from Arabic into English, but you have to go to the root of the word in order to know how to find the word in this kind of dictionary. The same dictionary, the good dictionary, another good dictionary is A.E. Lane. A.E. Lane is an excellent dictionary from Arabic into English as well. A.E. Lane is 13 volumes and also relies on the root of the word. Like istakhraja, you go and find it in the word kharaja. And then you look for the different forms of the verb. Usually it's the 6th form, but according to Hans Ver, he puts it as the 10th form. In order to know which form, you go to the introduction in that dictionary, in Hans Ver's dictionary, in order to know the origin or the root of these particular dictionaries. Now that is one thing. So what is important is to actually get to use a good dictionary. Another thing is, of course, this Hassan al-Karmi's dictionary, which is also a useful dictionary, which you can still use. And Hassan al-Karmi is a bilingual dictionary. So that's the second step. Third step is to be a translator after you researched all these words. After researching the words, then you go for translating them, translating the text as a whole. Then the following step is to be a proofreader. You proofread in English and Arabic the two texts to make sure that you don't miss any lines. And finally, you go for the proofreader, or not a proofreader, target reader, target language reader, where you read the text that you've translated and it has to make sense. Very important that your text makes sense, the target text that you have just done. I'm just going to wait now for some of the queries and some of the people who are actually interested in questioning me with regards to asking me certain problems that they face. If there are any person online who would like to actually be, so I can see that earlier there was GT's, he was talking earlier, and then before that English literature with Dr. Ala, and afterwards I Vibes, who is another person, and Rami Al-Muteri is a third one who has been online. So I'll wait for a few minutes, and then if there are no further queries about translation, I will stop here and then go for my own what I've been doing over the past few hours. Let me just wait for a bit, but in any case, while I'm waiting for these questions that everybody wants to, may I just look at some of the collocations, for example, that are happening and usually are problematic. For example, when you are saying, you can say a clean kitchen. Clean kitchen, if you want to translate it, you can translate it as immaculate kitchen, which is also another adjective, which will be good. Now, formal, what is the difference between formal typology and functional typology? Right. And this is from Rami Al-Muteri. He's asking about what is formal, what is functional. Now, of course, functional, there is a huge difference between formal and functional in terms of equivalence, for example. Formal equivalence means that you are translating literally. In other words, you are translating the content, the content of the original, and you are translating the form and the content of the source text. That is what formal means. Formal means شكليا بالعربي. شكلي means الطريقة الشكلية is to translate the form of the source language and the content of the source language. That is really a translation. This kind of translation is not really favored by many people, and that is because it can actually, style can be awkward. يعني بيكون الأسلوب شوي ركيك، لأن في ركاكة في الأسلوب. الركاكة في الأسلوب وفي التعبير وفي نقل الفكرة يجعلها not a very good idea to use. Formal here does not mean, for example, لا تعطي معنى الرسمية، إنما تعطي معنى الشكلية. وكلمة formal, it means that you are conveying the form of the source text, how it looks like, the paragraphs and so on, and all these collocational elements in it, or images, and the content of that particular text. That is the formal. The problem with formal is that, as I said, it becomes really problematic because sometimes you read the text, you don't understand what's going on because it doesn't make sense in the target language. That is one of the weaknesses of the formal approach to translation. The other part, the functional part, which is what many recent scholars are actually focusing upon, is the dynamic, what's called functional or dynamic, which serves a purpose. What is the purpose of the translation that you're doing? Based on that purpose, you translate. Now, in the functional, it is trying to see if the people who are reading the text can actually really act upon the text. In other words, let's say if it's a manual, you're translating a manual for workers in a company. And if you go for literal translation, sometimes maybe they don't understand what you are saying. So therefore the workers, who are reading your instructions, which are really translated, they are not going to actually follow them because they don't understand what you're saying. And it is important to make sure that people understand what you are trying to say. And that is really partly why I said earlier about the 5 steps or the 5 hats that you need to wear, which is the first one, as a source language reader, you read the source text on its own to understand it. Then you become researcher to search all the words that are difficult. Then thirdly, you do the translation. Fourthly, you proofread the translation. And fifth, last, is to read it as a target text. And that is where the problem lies. When you translate something and you give it to somebody and you ask them to read it and they don't understand it, then I'm sorry, you have failed in your translation. But of course, you need to know who is my audience as well. If your audience are children, then you have to make use of the simple language so children can understand what you're saying. But you cannot just use that for, if it is for children, you cannot use very complicated words. This is really problematic for children. So the audience, the target audience, the audience design, who are they that I'm translating to? Who are they who are going to read my work? And that is really essential. This applies also to subtitling, for example. When I am subtitling, let's say, for a children's show, I have to make sure that it is easy for them to read and understand, and I would not use very complicated expressions, for example. Now, going back to this dynamic, or what's called functional translation. Functional translation is really what is common in the target language. You are trying to keep it as close as possible to the target culture so they understand what you are saying. And also, you need to be aware that it is the context in which this is being said to your target audience. And the purpose of this translation, is it to educate them or is it to entertain them? This is the purpose of your translation, which is called scopus, and that is in the dynamic and functional equivalence. These are the ones that are an example of this. For example, in translation, let's say you are on the aeroplane and somebody said to you, would you like to eat some ham or some pork? And if you answer the steward and say, I am a Muslim, then how would you translate that? You would say, I mean, he did not ask you or she did not ask you whether you are Christian or Muslim or whatever religion you're in, you're believing. So they are asking you if you want to eat this kind of food or not. So, I mean, you could have said something like, no, I don't eat pork. But she didn't say, or you didn't say that. That means that you are translating the dynamic way when you say, no, I don't want to eat pork. If you translate, I am a Muslim, and translate it into Arabic, I don't eat pork, then that is what's called functional translation. One of the functional translations there. So it really depends on that. But also in the functional equivalence or functional, there will be also, it depends on how your approach to the text itself in the original, whether it is taking into account, especially if it's humor, the dynamic equivalence will be more acceptable and more, making sense is really the essential part of this. I just wait for another question. If there is any other question, I hope that I've actually clarified the difference between functional and formal equivalence or typology. I think it's let me just say while I'm waiting for some questions here, it is what makes sense really. It's making sense is important in translation. You need to make sense of what you are writing and what you are translating as a text. I just wait for more questions. Okay, I hope it's clear because I mean, Rami, I think most, if you go to this is what I usually ask when somebody asks functional equivalence or functional approach to translation, where they are trying to attract attention to their products, and that's why they use the functional equivalence so that they can get some sort of response or reaction from the audience. Nida, I think Eugene Nida was one of the first to talk about dynamic equivalence and how it's done. For example, I mean, I'll give you another example of this. For example, if you are talking about delivery of a baby delivery, delivery baby, or bread and butter. For example, the expression bread and butter. Bread and butter in English, it means الخبز والزبدة. طبعا الخبز والزبدة is not really the right equivalent in the target language, because here what you are trying to do is you're trying to give the equivalence that's actually acceptable as a collocation. Bread and butter will be كسب العيش يعني. كسب العيش will be bread and butter if you are talking about translating bread and butter, because bread and butter in this expression, for example, when you say this job is my bread and butter, and that means هذه وظيفتي التي أكسب منها لقمة عيشي. لقمة العيش can be translated from the word bread and butter. I mean, this is really one of these things that is really يعني بالمصري بيقولوا بيكسبوا منها عيش. Of course, عيش معناها bread. And this is really very similar to the word bread and butter in another language. So this collocation, which has got some social element to it. There is also law and order, for example. Law and order معناها يعني يتبع النظام، نظام القانون، يعني يتبع نظام القانون. فنظام القانون there is no lawful system as it were, but it's law and order. When you say law and order, meaning يحترموا القانون. يعني when you are translating it يحترم القانون or نظام القانون, that means you are translating it in a functional, dynamic way. You're not translating it القانون والأمر كما هي في الأصل. And this is really one of these things there. There is another, I mean, for example, when you say deliver a blow, deliver معناه يستلم, blow means ضربة, لكمة. deliver a blow يعني لكمه, deliver a blow يعني لكمه أو صفعه. So the word deliver does not have the same kind of collocation as in the Arabic. The same, deliver a baby. Deliver a baby يعني أنجبت طفلا. أنجبت طفلا يعني deliver a baby. يعني deliver a baby in hospital for example يعني أنجبت طفلا في المستشفى. فيعني كلمة أنجبت ما موجودة في القاموس deliver لأن معناها ينجب هنا في هذا المعنى في هذا السياق in this context. And that is a kind of functional. In a way, it's functional, in a way. And that I hope that, I mean, deliver news, for example, when you deliver news to people, يعني تخبرهم بخبر مثلا. Deliver a speech, deliver a lecture, this is another one. And all of these are, you can see that no translation word for word, because if you translate them word for word, you know, I mean, another example is bend the rules. You know, you can bend the rules. Bend the rules يعني تتجاوز القانون بطريقة ما, you know, bend the rules, تجاوز القانون. فبند معناه ينحني, يعني ينحني القانون. فإذا الكولوكيشن هنا يعني يعطي معنى آخر. طبعا of course these collocations of course they do not rely on the literal words, literal translation. They rely on their idiomatic meaning, and therefore it is better that way. But if we go to the functional, and let's say, for example, if I say, I am thirsty, and somebody translated as أستاذ بده كأس من الماء, يعني the teacher needs a glass of water. I didn't say glass of water. I need a glass of water. I said, I am thirsty. So this is a kind of implicature which is in the pragmatics. This is pragmatics and translation. التداولية والترجمة, وهي أصعب من ناحية الترجمة لأننا نعرف نريد, we want to know what's going to be happening. Now I think in films you'll find it in 007 for example. 007 films are full of these insinuations, allusions that are not really, you can spot them very quickly. It's very difficult to spot, and it's very difficult to understand as well. And that is really, also in humor, you will get that as well. And it is becoming more and more difficult when you reach that point where you're trying to actually get to translate them. Literal translation or formal, as Rami is saying, formal. Formal is to go for the form and content, formal. And it means the form, the way the text looks, and what the message of the text is, or the content of the text is. But when we look at NIDA and what NIDA says about dynamic equivalence is looking for the message and its effect. How does it affect the people who are reading this message? Are they going to react to it, or are they not going to react to it? And also the choice of words, whether they are positive or negative meaning to them. You know, sometimes some words has got some negative meaning or effect to them, and that negative effect maybe is in the original and not in the target language. Sometimes if it is negative in the original, it has negative effect in the original, you need to find a negative effect in the target language. So this is the job of the translator. Really, I mean, there is another thing which I want to say here. I mean, a translator is he's or she is in an unenviable situation. Why? Because the translator is trying to take other people's views and concepts in the source text, in the source language, and trying to take these concepts and put them in the target language. So in other words, the translator is trying to understand the brain of the person who wrote the text in a way than actually just only looking at the words. You're trying to see what the message is trying to say or understand what the text is trying to say. Sometimes the text is not very clear as to what it's trying to say, and it is important that you need to understand it really well. And this is the problem, that you are trying to convey from the source text concepts that are not yours as a translator, and you are trying to get them into the target language. And this is really problematic because you are trying to understand concepts or things, ideas and thoughts in the original and trying to put them in the target language. And here is another issue which I find also important to mention, is the creativity of the interpreter or the translator. You need to be, we as trainers to you, we cannot teach you, we can train you a little bit, but the creativity comes in from the translators themselves or from the people who are trying to learn translation, because the talent and creativity comes from the translators themselves. We cannot teach them that. We teach the 50% only. The other 50%, the translator or interpreter needs to have that kind of with them. Any other questions that you have in mind or you'd like to ask? Just something else which occurred to me now is when you are translating, of course, what you need to do after you read the whole text, the source text, and when you start translating the target text, never translate, and say this is a draft, and I'm going to rewrite it later on. No, you translate first as best as you can each sentence as you go along. So never move from one paragraph to the next without really getting the first paragraph really to the best of your ability. So translate it as best as you can, and don't say of course you're gonna actually review it and revise it, proofread it later on, but the actual thing is that you need to do it the first time as best as you can, and not wait and say I will revise it later on. So you write it really well and translate well, and then move to the next paragraph and so on until the end. Once you finish the whole text, then you go back to the beginning and revise it. But the revision should not take you long if you have done really a good job of the translation in the first hand. So you don't need to rewrite a lot of text while you're doing that. It's a lot of, it is creative writing in a way, because you are trying to find the best according to what you have as a vocabulary in your head, or which you have been reading over the years. Any other questions? You can ask any questions you like. In the chat. You can do that in the chat. Okay, I'm just waiting for you to do that. This is the one of the things about collocations and translating of collocation. Let's still carry on with the collocation while I'm waiting for any questions that you come up. If you have any questions, please ask, because I will straight away answer your questions. But meanwhile, I will just carry on explaining some of the things that do occur as in terms of when you're translating collocations. For example, run a business. When you run a business, you can't translate the word run as يركض and then a business, or run a show. When you run a show means you dir برنامجا and or you dir runs a business or runs a company. يعني يديروا meaning managing. When you say run a business, means you manage the business. So in actual fact, the word run loses its meaning and the word business keeps its meaning. And that's what is a collocation in the first place. Okay, any other questions that you have? You go ahead and write it in the chat box or chat in the chat, and I will be happy to answer your queries so we can have a discussion. Do you have any questions to ask? Okay, if there are no questions, I mean, that you have, then I can bid you goodbye for the next session, in the next, hopefully next time, which will be next Friday as well, where I will open discussion again and ask you to, if you would like to ask me any questions, or if you want me to, I mean now, if you have any suggestions, please let me know what these suggestions are, and I'll be more than happy to discuss them next in the next session next week on Friday, next week at the same time, 8 o'clock. If you want, give me the title of it, or if you want me to talk about that. I was planning to, in fact, to talk about dubbing, but I wasn't sure whether there are many who are interested in this area, so that's why I've changed it into a discussion like this one, and open to any questions that you have in mind about translation. I would say if you want to learn translation, you have to perfect your English, you have to perfect your Arabic, and yes, even if you're a native speaker of Arabic, you have to do that. You have to read a lot to improve your English and your Arabic, and the reading a lot is actually just very important. And of course, if you want to know some theories in translation, that will be useful, but always, I mean, theories are not really ideal. You cannot type token relationship in English translation. Type token in translation. Let me just look at what is type token, or token and type. Okay, let me just explain something about type and token. Usually, for example, going, gone, going, gone. This is what it's done usually in when they are selling something, like in an auction. They say going, gone. So here, if you are talking about how many words are there in terms of token, there are 3 words: going, gone, 3 words. Whereas in as a type, there are 1, because there are or 2 types perhaps, because going and going are the same with an ing form, and gone is in the 3rd form, passive, past participle form. So this is 2 forms, and there's also the type, if you want to really look at that more closely, it's really just 1 word, which is the word go, and it's changed into going and then gone. So it's 1 type. I think there's type, token, and there is another one. I can't remember now what it is called, but it's really going, gone. It actually can be counted as 3 tokens, 3 words, going, gone, or it can be type, 2 types, going, because it's repeated, and gone. So it's two types, going and gone. And also there is a third type, classification, where it's the word going only, which is just only one word on its own. So this is what it means. I hope that's clear. But this is what I understand it anyway from you about token and type. Okay. Any other questions that you have? Would you suggest for next session some maybe a topic that we would like to talk about, you'd like me to talk about? Because I'll be more than happy to cover the topic that you have in mind. I mean, it really varies because there's so many different types, but I wanted really you to tell me what you really lack or would like to be translating. You have to understand that in translation, if you translate something, you have to make sense of it. And if anybody reads your text and find that they don't understand it, that means you have failed in your task. So you have to make sure that you are writing some logical meaning of all these linked words and linked sentences together, because logic is very, very important in this. That's why sometimes they call it semantic, they call it cohesion at times, logical cohesion at times as well. So that is another one. The context is important. You need to understand the context. They used to call it, Halliday and Hassan used to call it the context of situation and context of culture. And that's when you are trying to understand the context of the culture in which this is happening, or in which something, this text is happening in. Any other questions or any other suggestions that you have in mind, please? It looks like there is no a particular question that you have in mind, so maybe I should bid you goodbye, and next time I would like to have more participants who are, you don't need to be shy about your questions. You can go ahead and, say your question. I would not consider your question simple or anything. It doesn't have to be a very complicated question. Okay? Do you have any questions at all? Please indicate if you have no questions. Then I can thank you very much indeed for following up with me in this evening with regards to some questions that are open to my audience to discuss. Have a nice evening, and I'll see you next week, next Friday at 8 p.m., same time as now, at 6 p.m. UK time, okay, so that we can actually discuss any other matters that you have in mind about translation, or even indeed about anything you have in mind about even the English language. If you have any issues with it as well, I'd be more than happy to explain that as well to you. Okay? All right, have a nice day and take care.